I don't know.
It's totally fine if she does. Hi, welcome to another episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal discussion about Star Trek, focusing on Star Trek The Next Generation. And today's episode is going to be the Schizoid Man. And I have a special guest, Mr. Satyr. Hello, Mr. Satyr.
Hello, Starfleet Boy.
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a beautiful Saturday on Cardassia Prime.
Oh, you're a Cardassian.
Oh yeah.
Very good. Now I have two Cardassians on the show. That's exciting. See, we're making. I hope. I just want to say your counterpart, Guldu Scott. He's not ready to become friends with the Federation. I hope that it can be something that you and I could work on. Maybe convincing him to sign a treaty and handing Bajor over to itself, to the Bajoran people. And, we'd help with the transition. We'd send a liaison to Terok Nor. Of course, you'd have to give Terok Nor to the Bajorans as well. But, we could talk more about it as time goes on. But,
okay, yeah. What do you guys? What do you say, Bajor for the Bajorans?
Yes, or he has a specific. He thinks it's Bajor, and I think it's Bajor. So we have and I think the show says it both ways, of course.
They love to say lots of terms and names many different ways.
Yes,
which is part of the fun. Yeah.
So today's, I'm going to jump right into the episode summary for Schizoid Man. So basically, it's the Enterprise is on its way to this planet that's called Graves Planet. It's named after this scientist, Ira Graves, and they're investigating a distress call, a very strange distress call, because someone keeps sending out a message for help, but then turns off the receiver, and so the Enterprise can't actually contact them. Anyways, when they get to the planet, they learn that the great Ira Graves, who lives on this planet, is doing his research in some sort of nano-cybernetics, is deathly ill, within hours of dying, and he figures out a way to manipulate data and transfer his he's already figured out a way to transfer his consciousness into a computer, maybe his consciousness, maybe his intelligence, we're not sure. But he then manipulates poor Data, who he gets to call him Grandpa, to hand over his body, basically, and takes over Data's body. And then he goes about, at first he's kind of, people think maybe Data's acting weird, but then, as his personality, as Ira Graves' personality becomes more dominant, the crew suspect something's awry, and it leads them to discover the truth. And then Ira Graves goes on this kind of crazy rampage where he professes his love to his assistant and hurts her. Then he goes and he to engineering. He subdues several of the engineering staff, and finally Picard has to have a heart-to-heart with him, and this convinces him that, yes, he's made a mistake. He should never have taken over Data's body, and he then puts himself into the Enterprise computer. Episode finished. I think I covered everything. What do you think?
Yeah, that's pretty much everything. Yeah.
So,
I mean, you didn't mention Data's beard.
Oh yeah,
which was my, I'm gonna have to say, my personal favorite part. When I started watching it, I'm like, I think this is the beard episode, when Troy and Geordi were walking down like the hallway or whatever, and they're like talking about him. I'm like, wait, is this the beard episode?
It's a very dignified.
He's beard. Like, come in. He's all, I'm like, oh, the beard, hooray!
That is a very funny moment, and I love Counselor Troy's reaction.
Right,
she just can't take it. She can't deal with it.
On it, man. I felt bad for Data. I'm like, what? He looks great.
I thought that was a great moment. What did you think of the episode overall? Like, what was your feeling of you rewatched it? Since when? When was the last time you saw this episode?
Oh, probably I rewatched it today. The last time I saw it was probably 5 years ago, something like that.
Oh, great. So how do you feel about it? What did you think about it?
It was a solid episode. It was good. Like, it wasn't one of the baddies. There's definitely worse episodes. And I feel like the guy who played Ira Graves, whatever that character actor's name is, he did a pretty good job of playing like a salty old mad scientist guy.
He reminds me of like Ernest Hemingway, and I think if I'm not mistaken, that actor has probably played Ernest Hemingway at some point.
He kind of looks like Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah, he does.
He does.
I thought it was interesting how he kind of had one of those personalities that was like at once charming and repulsive. In this episode I think we're introduced to Dr. Scylla for the first time, the Vulcan medical officer. And anyways, he says to her, he like both insults her and compliments her, or in a very kind of sexist way. Right. Where he says, I hate doctors, no one trusts them, and then but you're a pretty beautiful woman. Right. And then he goes on to tell Counselor Troy that she's also very, very beautiful. And then I like that scene because she handles it in a really kind of good way. She's a professional officer. She probably wants to punch him in that moment, but he's a highly respected scientist. And, even in the beginning of the episode, the Federation has made this like a priority mission for the Enterprise.
Which I thought weird, or not weird, but how there was what was the name of that transport ship that had a hull breach?
Oh yeah,
like they barely even talk about it. They're like, oh, they're all good. And that was it. Like that's all. That's all they mentioned.
That was a cool procedure. The
quick drop warp.
Yeah, the near warp transport. It was kind of a cool thing. I thought that was like interesting because something must have happened, because it was like Dr. Pulaski basically doesn't come back for the rest. Like the episode starts with her making a log entry, so you're thinking, this is going to be like a Dr. Pulaski focused episode, and then she's like, well, this hull breach. So I imagine like something happened, like Diana Muldaur was like, oh, I have another gig. I'm sorry.
She got booked for Murder She Wrote or something.
Yeah, or something like that. And they're like, what do you mean? We're recording this week. And she's like, sorry, guys, just can't do it. And then they're like, okay, we'll write in a hull breach on another ship, and we'll leave you there. So I don't know. That was a little odd, I thought. And but it worked ultimately.
Right.
I mean,
but she doesn't. Too bad, but it was just funny. Like, that sounds like really serious. This guy might be a high-ranking scientist or whatever. But.
I did like the kind of the way that Brent Spiner portrayed his transformation from Data to Graves, and one of the scenes I was looking forward to that I remembered the last time I watched this was the funeral scene in the transporter room, where he's like, to know him was to love him, to love him was to know him. Those who knew him loved him. Those who didn't know him loved him from afar. It was like pretty awesome.
Yeah, I remember like when that scene was happening. I was like, I remember this scene, like just because that line in itself is so memorable. Because it's just like, what, and just delivered from Brent Spiner, like. He's so good. I love Brent Spiner. He's a great actor.
Who's your now you've watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, and probably how many Star Trek series have you gotten through completely?
Next Generation I've probably watched 10 times. Deep Space Nine, I'm watching it again. So nice. Probably this is my 4th time watching it. I watched Enterprise maybe twice all the way through. And then just maybe randomly like, I'll watch an episode of Enterprise. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
The original series, I think I've maybe seen like 4 of the episodes just because I can't get into it.
Well, maybe you'll feel different.
So, like it just looks so old. Like I try to watch it, but I just can't. Like
Well, Starfleet Boy plans on discussing the original series after we're done with The Next Generation, so maybe you'll be able to try again at that point. So in the next generation, now since you're a fan of the series and you've seen it completely, who's your favorite, like who are your favorite characters, like, and what do you love about it the most?
I mean, Data obviously is my favorite character. Yeah. Data. I mean, I like the whole family vibe. Like I mentioned that. It's I mean, Picard. Like there's nothing I actually don't really like Dr. Pulaski. Pulaski, is that her name?
Pulaski, yeah,
Pulaski. I don't like her.
I didn't like her when I was a kid.
And like she's too just mean, and I don't know. I'm using bad adjectives to describe how she acts, but
I think that's cool that you remember her that way. I think what I've noticed with this show, doing Starfleet Boys, I'm looking at it again. I'm 38, so it's like, and it's been a while since I've seen some of these episodes. Some of them I don't even remember like ever rewatching, even though I'm sure I did. Like some of them are like, oh wait, I totally blanked out on that episode. How did that happen? And that's cool. Maybe my brain's just like really weird. But I do like Dr. Pulaski this time around. I actually like her. Because I've seen since my first experience with Diana Muldaur was on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and she is so like the first time you meet her, she's exactly the things you described. Like she's exactly that way, and I think she's meant to ruffle the feathers a little bit as far as the character goes. But then she has a nice little arc, and I do remember that. Like I do remember that it resolves really nicely for her. And though she's like, you could think of her as like the like, I don't know, the guest doctor, and I kind of liked it, because Dr. Crusher comes back to us in season 3, and then everyone just forgets about Dr. Pulaski. It's like, so I guess it's totally understandable.
Yeah, you brought up some good points, because I remember a couple episodes where she's not that bad, but just in general, she's my least favorite character.
The next episode is a good warm up to Dr. Pulaski episode. It's I forgot the name of it, but it's about the kids that create the super virus that makes you grow old. So when you look ahead on Netflix or whatever, you can check that one out. Another thing I really liked about this episode was the whole concept of being able to transfer your consciousness into a non-organic body, like an android or a robot or a computer or a machine. And that's a concept that a lot of scientists and philosophers and just theoreticians and science fiction writers have dealt with and also continue to talk about. And I think there's a really popular concept called the singularity, and that's kind of made it from obscure science theory to popular discussion. And what do you think about that? What do you think about the idea of your consciousness being able to continue on after your original biological body has perished?
I mean, I think it's a neat idea. Like I'm sure each person would have, if it came to the point where we could do that, each person, could decide whether they wanted their either knowledge base. I mean, I don't think I know enough to want to put it into a computer, because I'm sure millions of other people know all the same stuff that I know, like I'm not some special scientist or something. But I think it's cool. I say, why not? If you can do it, do it,
But I mean, what makes you is like, despite the fact that you have similar experiences or similar knowledge, as far as like the concept or understanding of self that humans have, is that we're taught, and we believe, many of us, that we're completely unique individuals, that we have like a unique personality, that our personality, the way we've manifested in this point in space-time, has never existed before and may never exist again. There's only some people believe that like when you die, you transcend into a state of complete consciousness or some kind of like thing. Some people think you go to heaven. Some people think you go to hell. Some people think there's oblivion. We have all kinds of beliefs about what happens afterwards. What's compelling about this, I think, is that there's like a path of knowing. It's like, well, when I get really old and my body's retired and it doesn't want to do what I want it to do anymore, and my heart's not gonna make it or my lungs aren't going to, but I can just put myself into this quote unquote Tin Man here, and I can continue on for an indefinite period of time. I've always been fascinated by this, and I think it's something that like that if humanity is playing with technology and integrating it all the time, and we have other concepts like this, the Borg are a great example and things like that, but an ideal way to continue would be to either create a human body, like a biological body that could last for like hundreds of years or thousands of years, or to put our consciousness into a robotic body. And so, yeah, I think you should consider it because you have something very unique to offer that no one else does, and that's your perspective. And whether or not you
that was my knowledge, not like my personality or my perspective. It was just like all the BS I got stored up in the old knowledge.
You never know. You might have a unique piece of knowledge that could save humanity one day. I thought that another thing that was neat that came up in this episode was the idea that Data is not a valuable life form. Obviously, the crew of the Enterprise don't think that, but there's that scene where Ira Graves just he's like, listen, Picard, I don't know why you're so interested in preserving Data. I was a living person. Data's a machine. Like, he doesn't need a body. Like, he doesn't have consciousness. He's just a bunch of programming, like he's not real. And we're going to see this again. And I think there's a really great episode this season coming up where they actually put Data on trial.
The Measure of a Man.
Yeah, The Measure of a Man, to determine his person.
This is kind of like a, shoot off, but when do they add like the Blu-ray version or like the HD version of the show to Netflix? Because I'm obviously watching it on Netflix.
Yeah, so since we started the show, which is now like several weeks ago, actually several months ago, that was one of the first things I discovered was that Netflix has the remastered.
That's crazy. There's one
it looks
scene,
great, right?
like after Graves transferred his consciousness to Data, where they're on the Enterprise. I think it was after the funeral, where what was her name? Kareen was I think she was sitting in 10 forward or something. It was like right when they were about to leave his body out in space or whatever, and she's looking out the window, and it shows him going to warp.
Oh yeah,
it was awesome. I was like, whoa! Like, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of cool things. I definitely didn't notice on Encounter at Farpoint because I watch it on a really tiny screen. But now that you mention it, that like all the effects just look way better in the remastered edition. I have the DVDs back in store. They're put away in storage if I ever have to dig them out.
Yeah, like the set, like the box set.
But it's the original effects. So I'd be curious to one day kind of watch the two of them side by side to see what they're changing. And actually, I don't know the name of it, but there's a YouTube channel that shows several scenes, what they used to look like and how they look remastered. And I sometimes have a lot of fun watching that,
checking those out.
Yeah. Excellent. Any other thoughts about this episode?
I thought that the set design of Graves' house was pretty cool.
Yeah,
it was alien enough, but it was still fit, TNG.
What? How do you get your own planet? I mean, it's called Graves' World, like Graves' Planet, and it's like, what did he say to? He must be designing some crazy. He must be doing some crazy research that's going to affect the Federation in amazing ways, because I can't imagine in the Star Trek future, there's not really any kind of commerce or exchange of money, so I can't imagine he bought the planet. I think it was given to him.
Or like, do you think the planet is actually designated Graves' planet, or
Yeah, I
like do
mean,
they just like offhandedly refer to it as Graves'
no,
planet?
no, it's an
No one
emergency
that lives
situation, and knowing Picard, I don't think he would mess around like that. I mean,
there.
you know what I mean? Like he's very serious about his job, and so it's like a serious situation, and they just kind of casually they mention like Graves' world, like and it's like they're the only inhabitants on the planet as well. It's just him and his assistant, which is all there might have been other people there, but it's like, yeah, like I'm so
What would you do down
amazing that
there?
I have a planet. I mean, that might be a fun thing. Like, I guess Elon Musk kind of
Oh
wants
yeah.
to do that. Like he wants to go and go to Mars and live there, live the rest of his life out there. So
Well, he has the money, so he can if he wants to, right?
Mars will be renamed Musk World.
Musk's planet. What else? I don't know. I thought it was funny. Or wait, side note. He said Graves was talking to Data, like, "Oh, call me Grandpa" or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Oh, I taught Soong everything he knew." But like, how old is this guy? Like, isn't Noonien Soong like 200 years old, 250 years old or something? Like,
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing is that we know that in Star Trek, humans are living into their hundreds,
mhm.
because Dr. McCoy was like 150 something years old, in the first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, we know that like humans have figured it out, and he's also a crazy scientist. He's probably using unauthorized therapies.
That's
It's
true.
it's very possible that he got this disease from an unauthorized therapy to extend his lifespan, and so same thing goes for Dr. Soon. In fact, I think in Australia, there's a couple of scientists that have created like a kind of concoction. You drink it like a wine every day, and it's supposed to like de-age you. And they're like
What?
in their 60s or something, and they act or have the physical presence of a 40-year-old. So,
What? That's crazy.
yeah, I mean, like
Wow.
it's yeah, science fiction does bleed into science a lot. um,
Did you notice that it was like right when Data was starting to act more like Graves, uh
mhm.
he whistled the "If I Only Had a Brain" or
Oh
in the show
yeah,
Heart.
yeah, that
And
was a
like
good.
Data can't whistle. So that was like
Oh,
the
that's
first dead
right.
giveaway.
Hey, that's
Like
a
they
great.
encounter a Farpoint, he's all like however he whistles, like
Well,
and I was
he
like, "Oh, he's
whistles.
whistling."
He whistles pretty okay, but he just can't get that last, the pop goes the
Mm-hmm.
weasel part. But yeah, that was a really great catch. That's excellent. And there was also, it's funny because the episode that we just released today, but since we pre-recorded these, this is all very timey-wimey. You'll see this episode in a few months. We're that far ahead, yay! But live on the air as of the recording date of this episode is the Skin of Evil episode, and Armis, the bad guy in that, calls Data Tin Man, and then it's interesting that they echo that in this episode where the Tin Man theme comes up again.
Right.
I think it comes up a couple times, and I like that also is that like um, where there is a parallel. I think that Graves tells the story of the Tin Man and he simplifies it for Data, and it's like he says, he's always wanted to have this, have a heart, and then he finds out that he's had one all along, and Data's like, oh, a happy ending. And funny enough, that's Data's story, like in a nutshell. I mean, as we get further along in the series, there's like no doubt in my mind that Data is a sentient being, and he's trying to be human, but whatever he is, he's a person.
Right.
Whether he identifies as human or whatever, is beside the point. But he's definitely a person, like an actual like life form.
Life form, yeah, definitely.
So to speak. Yeah,
I
so it's
agree with
pretty
you.
cool.
What's you asked me who's your favorite character?
It's really tough. I would have a tough time answering, just like you. Like
Right.
it tends to be Picard mostly.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to love just like his story, just because he was such an authority figure
Right.
for me as a child. Like I definitely like looked up to Captain Picard, but I think in many ways, being interested in science and like science fiction and like growing up, identifying as a nerd and like being rather awkward and things like that. I think Data and Wesley appealed to me a lot as well, and kind of if you could combine those two characters somehow. But yeah, I love them all now. It's like it's been like many years of watching The Next Generation and seeing the story of these wonderful characters unfold, and so now I just like I love all of them. Whenever I see them on screen, I get excited. Like if it's in an odd way, like if I know them. Of course I don't, but we know the characters that the actors portray, so it's kind of a cool thing. Yeah.
Let's see. One thing was fun. I liked when Data Graves was like belittling Wesley. Oh, that was pretty funny. Oh, yeah. He's like, oh, you know nothing, boy. Like,
I know. I think that the crew's reaction was pretty funny. Like they didn't know what to make of it. Right. They were just like so confused. They're like, we're not sure what's going on here. Are you playing a joke on us, Data? Because Data likes to do things like role play into characters or tell jokes that are poor. They're in poor taste. So you could see how the crew took a while to like catch on to like what was actually happening here. So that was really well. I thought that was really well done and really well written too.
Did you like Brent Spiner's like pervy old man?
Oh yeah, he's great at it. I mean, like, Brent Spiner's one of those actors that like I think he's marvelous because he can play like a bad guy. Like he can be really kind of villainous, but he can also, as we know from like Data, be like the most charming, like the most endearing character, innocence and like things like that. And I think it's extraordinary that he has that kind of range, because like Dr. Oaken, for example, is such a bizarre character and he's nothing like any of his other characters. And so I really like Brent Spiner.
Yeah.
All those guys are at Star Trek Las Vegas
this weekend, right? Or this whole week. Twitter's blown up. I was like, what?
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see that. Obviously we're not there, but we're there in spirit. I'm there in spirit at least.
Right. Yeah, I saw a couple of like Odo autographs where Rene Aubergenois or whatever. I can't even pronounce his name.
It's Aubergenois.
Aubergenois.
Yes.
Like threw a little, and wrote Odo on it, like signed it for who. Like, oh, that's really awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
But I mean, that's not TNG related, but
no, it's
kind of cross over a little
Starfleet
bit.
Boy is focused on TNG right now, but we happily welcome. It's very casual and informal, and so we happily welcome free discussions about anything. Like, there's nothing off the table. But as I've reminded several times, Goldie Scott, this is the PG-13 version.
Okay.
Drunk Space Nine, for those of you who want like rated R talk, that's Drunk Space Nine. This is more of a casual, informal, fun show.
Yeah, I figured about it as much. Like, like I'm trying to be on my best behavior.
You're doing great. You're doing fantastic. Do you have any other questions or thoughts about the episode?
No.
I can't think of any. I think we covered just about all the major points in it. I think so. Now, if you've been watching the recorded show, we're on a 5-point scale, but somewhere between there and today, we switched to a 10-point scale.
Oh, okay.
So you have to.
The last episode I listened to was a 5-point scale.
Yeah, it was a 5-point scale, but everyone agreed to align on a 10-point scale. So, if you would be so kind as to give your rating, or I could go first if you like.
No, I'll go first. I'd say. Wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. Say 6, 6.5.
Yeah, I like that. So I was gonna give it a 6. I'm gonna go ahead and match you and give it a 6.5 right. Because it's a pretty fair episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it had its moments. It had some funny parts that were kind of, but a lot of it was solid.
What would have, in your opinion, what would have made this episode like maybe a 7 or an 8? because I don't want you to stretch it so far that like what would make this a 10. That would be like, you know, a lot.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
like
that would
what would you say they could have done better as writers or, you know, as the production in your mind, in your opinion, to make it a 8?
Well, I feel like the ending was kind of just like it just wrapped itself up like too nicely. You know, like Picard gave him a talking to and got smacked, and then the guy's like, "Oh, okay, you know, like I'll go put my knowledge into Data's computer." You
By the
know?
way, it's kind of scary that he's actually in the computer. I mean, like,
No, right? Like nobody was like, "Wait,
yeah, that's a good point. Like, no one's like a little concerned. You know, probably Picard goes upstairs later to his quarters and he's like, "Computer, erase Dr. Graves from your data," or something like that. But yeah, I think for me personally, I would have actually liked to have seen the actor who played Graves, a story that where like maybe he was more in it, but obviously in an hour, it'd be hard to kind of like get to the point of like him transferring his consciousness and give like Data enough time to kind of evolve into Graves. So I don't know how they could have done it, but it would have been neat to see more of him.
Yeah, it would have been cool to see maybe in like, you know, 3 or 4 episodes before like Graves, you know, like maybe touched on it a little bit, like what he's up to, you know, like what he's actually developing on that planet and how it's important to Starfleet.
Yeah,
You know?
I think so.
So then they're like, "Oh, Graves."
A lot of this stuff gets expanded in Star Trek has its own expanded universe, just like Star Wars. And so a lot of these concepts are expanded in the books. I don't usually do the research, but the Doctor has a huge knowledge of.
Oh yeah. When
so we'll have to ask him.
You know, he's always pulling out the tomes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah, he knows.
about this?
But I would imagine that'd be a great thing to cover because he is a compelling character, Ira Graves, and so I wouldn't mind seeing more stories about him in the future. But that would be, I think that for me, somehow having him on the show a little longer would have made it probably an 8 for me because I was really delighted by that character. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty solid episode for me as well. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on your very first episode. I hope you had a fun time. I had a fun time.
Glad to be here. Yeah, love talking about Star Trek. So
yay. All right, so now we do this part. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.